Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome back to the Muslim Matters podcast, where we discuss everything under the sun that affects Muslims, such as faith, local and global politics, social media, sex education, civil rights, and family matters, all coming from a traditional Orthodox perspective. Subscribe to our podcast and follow us online on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram on our handle, Muslim Matters, and check out our site daily at MuslimMatters.org.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome to the Muslim Matters podcast. I am your host, Zainab bint Younus, with my co-host, Irtiza Hasan. Ramadan Mubarak, Irtiza.
Ramadan Mubarak, Zainab.
So we have been away from the podcast for a while. There's a fair bit of sickness on my end. Alhamdulillah, doing better right now. And of course, just general life busyness. I'm sure you've been pretty busy yourself, Irtiza.
No, absolutely. And it's good to hear you're doing better. As we're recording this here in the first couple of days of Ramadan, I've been rotating to work in Tulsa and Oklahoma City, and they're having the highest per capita ratio of flu breakout. So a lot of my colleagues, I've seen families, children, a lot of people sick. So definitely, Allah give you shafa, and anyone else from our listeners, brothers and sisters who's listening who might be sick. We hope everybody feels better soon.
Ameen. And as we said, we are in the first week of Ramadan, and the first few days are either a mix of just adjusting to the caffeine withdrawal, but also just being excited about Ramadan, which is great. And alhamdulillah, this year is a little bit easier of a beginning for sure. The days are finally getting shorter. We're past that longest Ramadan of the year, longest Ramadan of like a couple of decades that we had previously. And so everybody's getting back into having a more balanced Ramadan schedule, which is great. And I know for people who are working, people who are in school, there's still challenges of still have to adjust to getting up early enough for school, getting enough hours of sleep and nutrition in to function in the office. And even those who are stay-at-home parents or caregivers or retired, there's different challenges that come up with every Ramadan. And I know for myself, alhamdulillah, I've had an easy first few days. Tomorrow I'm back in the office, and that's going to be a bit of a struggle. Inshallah, we'll see how that goes. But let's just dive into the yearly Ramadan struggles and the feelings that so many people have. There's always the excitement in the air for sure. There's looking forward to the sweetness of Ramadan, but there's also just people's changing circumstances in life, right? There's kids who are growing older, and in other households, there's newborns, there's toddlers, there's some people going through just really big life changes, whether that's moving or bigger family changes or health challenges. You want to share a little bit about how your Ramadan is similar to previous years, or maybe a bit different to previous years, and how you're planning on accommodating for that?
No, totally. One thing I'll tell you, I've noticed this a lot. I feel like there was a trend, and I don't like using labels like religious or non-religious Muslims, but let's say some of them were practicing or maybe traditional community versus maybe some who are not from that community. I feel like there was a trend some years where really like keeping up with the Joneses and really like these fancy and lavish type of Ramadan iftars and Ramadan parties. But I really feel that we have this collective consciousness of with post like what was happening in Gaza. And it's not only Gaza, of course, Gaza from last October, October 7th, but also you see Sudan. You also see so many things happening in other parts of the world. We still see poverty, famine, a lot of issues in different parts of the Arab world, African countries, Pakistan, Bangladesh. I'm going to tell you that I've really noticed that people, I noticed in my own family, people try really, if not the rest of the year, in Ramadan to be a little more simplistic, a little more basic, a little more thankful, a little more, what do we really need to go out 2-3 times this week? Do we really need to do something? So, and I feel that in my family, even, I think I may have mentioned this to you, Zainab, last year, maybe you and Siraj both. One cool thing, and I'll credit my wife, Syra has done this for years, where about a month before Ramadan, we have a family meeting, and it's to plan Ramadan. So it's like a couple of things. As a family, the kids are involved, and it's a few things like, okay, whether you're in college or a senior in school or a middle school, okay, what are we going to do for Taraweeh first? Do we want to go to this masjid or go to one masjid on the Monday to Thursday school nights? Do we want to go some farther masajid on the weekend? And then we talk about iftars. My wife's general rule is, look, I like to limit it to one social thing a week. I'm a little more on the social end. So I tie the social part into ibadah because I'm like, look, we get invited to a lot of stuff, fundraisers, khatams. They're good causes. It's not just like we're hanging out at a pizza party or something. And So I tried it. So then my negotiation with my wife is, okay, you know what? I'll join one a week, maybe two a week if there's really some cause. If you need to do more than that, you can go. Some of the kids can go, do your thing, and we'll catch up after a tarawih or afterwards at the house. So I'll credit her a lot. And I hope for our listeners who are listening and for anybody, I do like the idea of like a plan for Ramadan meeting, because I think like a month out, it gets you in the mindset. So for us, I would say a couple things that were different, just again, a little bit more subdued, a little more trying to be a little more thankful, a little more simple Ramadan, and not as much, hey, yeah, we fasted all day, so let's really live it up now at night sort of thing. So I think that's one thing we're trying, and I think there's still room for improvement, certainly for me and probably a lot of folks. So that's one thing I would say is different.
Yeah, I love that idea of pre-planning your Ramadan. That is the smart thing to do. I'm one of those people who procrastinate to the last minute. I only got my Quran journal out like the night of, but it really depends on everyone's situations and circumstances too, right? I love the idea that you implement. I find that really valuable. And I'm sure people with bigger families as well will find that really helpful. For me, it's me, my child, my husband. So we keep it pretty low key as it is, and there's not too much fuss to worry about. But there's obviously, like I said, just changes in life. And I want people to think about how when you were growing up, what your Ramadans looked like when you were a kid versus a teenager versus in high school and in exam season or in university. Just every phase of life, Ramadan is really different. And I was thinking about how some of my fondest Ramadans were when I was a teenager, and just that kind of carefree, hanging out with your friends, doing tarawih, excited to do that kind of thing, and how different it is and has been for me, obviously having a child when she was young, and then now as she's older and more independent. And it's really beautiful. I think people underestimate how much you can connect with your kids over Ramadan and just sitting with them and making that part of their experience. And a lot of people think, oh, decorating for Ramadan or having, playing on Ramadan nasheeds, like these are small things for little kids, but older kids like it too, and older kids enjoy it as well. And it brings that atmosphere of Ramadan into the home. And then, of course, sitting down, planning out your khatam schedule, or just maybe having the kids, if not pursuing a full khatam, how about reciting a couple of pages in Arabic and then reading the English translation, making sure that you listen to at least one short Islamic lecture a day. There's just so many different ways to have a beneficial Ramadan. And I don't want people to fall into the trap of thinking that you need to have Ramadan one particular way, because nobody's Ramadan is going to be the same, right? But the key ingredients to everyone's Ramadan is going to be the same. The intention to dedicate ourselves to worship, growing closer to Allah. And this is going to look so different for so many people, right? For some people, it's going to be completing a khatam of the Quran. So for some people, it's going to be praying every night in the masjid. And for others, they'll be reading a single page of the Quran, listening to that Islamic lecture. Being focused on taking care of family, especially for moms who have young kids with them. It's exhausting. And I remember when my daughter was a toddler, it was a struggle to get any amount of Quran done in the day, just because you're running around trying to keep this little human alive, right? And for those who have more than one child, that's even more of a challenge. For some people, whether it's health challenges or age or whatever else it might be, they're not even capable of fasting, but they're still believers. They're still going to benefit from the month of Ramadan. And this is going to include worship through dhikr, through reflection, through prayer, through charity, through volunteering perhaps. And I just want everybody who's listening to remember, whether you're married or single, whether you're in university or you're an adult working a corporate job, or you are a fresh convert, or you are somebody who is, grown up in a Muslim family, but you were away from the deen and now you're trying to come back to the deen. Your Ramadan is going to be different from everybody else's. And even though there is this social media perspective about the perfect family Ramadan, and as you mentioned, going to invitations and hanging out with friends, and the decor thing is really big in like Muslim mommy circles. But those aren't the things that are going to make or break your Ramadan. That's going to be between you and Allah. And I just want everybody to really be focused on what that means for themselves. And again, it's going to look super different for everybody in so many different ways. And we don't want people to feel like their Ramadan isn't as good as somebody else's Ramadan, because the only person who you're competing against essentially is supposed to be yourself and your previous years. And if this is your first year in Ramadan, you've got a fresh start, and it's going to be a challenge, and nobody expects you to do Ramadan perfectly. I don't think any of us really does Ramadan perfectly, simply because we're human. Irtiza, you're on mute.
Sorry. Was I on mute that whole time?
Yeah, you were.
Okay, I'll just start now and we can track.
Yeah, just jump into it. Let's watch him cut off.
So, no, Zainab, I think you make a really good point. And I'll tell you, I have in my community a brother, a friend of mine, who he's dealt with a lot of hardship recently. He's dealt with a divorce, he's lost a parent. He also has a child with some sort of difficulty or illness. And he's been getting help, like counseling and some therapy. But long story short, he would tell me how Ramadan was his favorite month of the year before all these problems surfaced. He lost a parent, divorce, etc. But more recently, Ramadan is a time he almost dreads in a way. And I said, SubhanAllah, why? How could it have been your favorite month and now? And he's, man, because Ramadan now, he goes, all the stuff I used to do before. I used to do Taraweeh. I used to do Etikaf. I'm fasting. I'm hosting people for fast. I'm going for Fajr in the masjid, then going to work early. And he goes, now I'm just with the therapy, sometimes I'm depressed. I physically can't get up. I'm sad about my kid. I'm sad my parent passed. So then I used to not really subscribe to this thought, but I caught myself telling him, I said, man, don't compare your Ramadan to anybody else. I said, Allah knows what you're going through. And then he was like, yeah, we read this about the Sahaba. And I said, look, absolutely. And those things are true. But I said, the stuff you're going through, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sees you. And I said, yes, always strive and always wish you can be that best Ramadan, that best person, that amazing Ramadan. But I said, look, at the end of the day, like you said, all these challenges have emerged. And so there was that. And I just generally agree with everything you're saying, that there's certain things that are big in the circles, but at the end of the day, Ramadan, everyone's going to have their own journey. But Zainab, I did want to ask you one question before we get too far ahead. Do you have a favorite, or you or your family, do you have a favorite Islamic series you listen to in Ramadan, or like a qari? I know many of us have multiple qaris we like. Do you have any favorites that you're like, hey, Ramadan, this is my person, or this is the series? Or for the listeners, and you know what, for our listeners, once this posts, please post yours on the comments as well. But do you have any favorites in that?
My daughter and I have been doing the Yaqeen series every year for the last several years. So last year was the Why Me series. This year, Imam Umar is doing the other side based on the book Kitab al-Ruh about the souls and the journey through the Barzakh. And that's honestly our main daily staple. I try not to overload things, like our schedules are already pretty busy. So we just try to make sure that we have one small thing that's consistent. So after Taraweeh, my daughter and I sit down, we have some post-Taraweeh snacks, and we watch an episode of that latest series. And during the day, I'll be listening to different sheikhs with their Ramadan khataras. Sheikh Tamara Gray has a daily khatara on Instagram, actually. And there's so many options, mashallah, for speakers with Ramadan content daily. On Muslim Matters, we are hosting the Institute of Knowledge's annual Ramadan series with Sheikh Farhan Zubairi. The first few episodes are already up with transcripts. So there's so much to pick and choose from. I just try to make sure that one thing is consistent for myself and my daughter. Even for Quran, there's so many reciters. The Qariya app is super amazing for women who want to listen to female reciters. And so that's one thing that I do love a lot. And then, of course, everybody has at least I think everybody has their Quran playlists as well that they go through. So having that playing in the background as you're going about your day, if you're able to do that, those are the things that also bring that Ramadan atmosphere. How about you? What do you guys do?
No, so we totally agree with you. Ditto on the Yaqeen series. We've also done that as a family for some years now. Really love it. We sometimes may mix it up with some one-offs from, say, Mufti Mank or Sheikh Yasser Burjas about Ramadan, or the Fadail of Ramadan, or Fiqh of Ramadan, just for refreshers. We'll do those as a family. But I'll tell you, Quran, for the longest time, probably from college onward, 20 years, was just locked in on a lot of Saudi reciters. So my typical Ramadan would be like Sudais, Shuraim, maybe Hudaythi, maybe one or two others. 2 Ramadans ago, it's after my son's teacher. He gave me a tip, and I've stuck with this playlist since. I still definitely enjoy Sheikh Shuraim and a lot. But Sheikh Nurain, Muhammad Siddiq, the Sudanese, I just find his recitation amazing. And then also I'll mix in a little Muhammad Ayub or Sheikh Abdul Rashid Sufi as well, who I just find amazing. I find there's a melodious nature for the Sudanese and some of the Somali reciters that sometimes I feel like they don't get as much traction and attention among some of maybe the Dacian Arab crowd who's more used to the Khaliji reciters or the Saudis or the Egyptians. But man, this has really been something that I've enjoyed at least the last 2 Ramadans now.
Yeah, I think it's really cool to discover new qaris from different parts of the world whom we're not often used to listening to. And honestly, African Qur'an are highly underrated and their recitation's amazing. Whether, like I said, Somali, Sudanese, it's just really incredible, mashallah. The different styles are such a beautiful testament as well to the beauty of the Qur'an, that it is recited in so many ways, its perfection, but also having that unique flavor that reflects the diversity of the Ummah and makes me think about even the way that the Qur'an is revealed in different dialects to people, which is really cool, honestly. And the other thing that is a recurring issue in Ramadan for us this year, honestly, every year for a very long time, but especially prominent in our hearts, is knowing that the genocide in Gaza is continuing, right? Even though technically there was a ceasefire approved, we know every single day the Zionists have been violating that ceasefire. They have already stopped, once again, all humanitarian aid from going in, all food and water from going in. They just shut down power to desalination plants so that those people who could access water in Gaza no longer can. And it's very painful. It's something that we are continuing to try and stay updated with, but it's also a struggle because there's, on one hand, I don't want to say the fatigue, the information fatigue, and the emotional exhaustion, the emotional fatigue of it all, because we're so privileged living where we are, how we are in the West, protected from those things by and large, except for those whose families are directly being impacted. May Allah protect them all. But
I mean,
this is something that has become a part of our Ramadans, I feel. And it's not just Palestine, it's also the Muslims of Sudan. Last year we had that as well, and this year as well. The Rohingya Muslims have been suffering for so many years. The Uyghur Muslims have been suffering for so many years. And it's it weighs on our hearts, but I think at the same time, a way to rephrase it or reframe it, even for myself, is that making dua for these Muslims in other parts of the world, it is part of our Ramadan ibadah. So we can't afford to just turn off the news completely. We can't afford to disconnect and say, it's distracting me from my ibadah. It can be a form of ibadah if we have the right intention. And of course, it should never be interfering with fulfilling our fara'id, with fulfilling our basic obligations and responsibilities in life. But it's definitely a hard emotional experience that weighs heavily on the ummah collectively.
no, I don't. I think you said that, to be honest. I think you're spot on. And that pain, in fact, I think that pain is beautiful because it says, we know in the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ that the Ummah is one body. And if one part of it is feeling something, we're going to feel it. I think that comes from that being Ummah centric or being Ummah focused potentially. But so I totally agree with you. We can't shut that news off. We can't say, okay, you know what, this is too painful. Let's just forget. If you don't see it or if you don't read about it, it goes away. But I will say one thing, and there's no amount of love and dua and focus that we could give to Gaza or Sudan or the Rohingya or so many other places, and obviously Gaza being right now at the forefront. But I will say one thing I've seen, this is just in social circles, so it is anecdotal. I'm not saying it's widespread, but I'm guessing that if I'm seeing it, I'm guessing some of our listeners have probably have seen this as well, is that Ramadan, there's a lot of priorities. And alhamdulillah, the Ummah can support Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's wills. We can support all these priorities and projects and needs, not to call Gaza or Sudan projects. Those are obviously humanitarian crisis situations that are obviously at the forefront. But I've noticed one thing where somebody may try to fundraise for completing a masjid renovation, or maybe for a Muslim woman's halfway home, or like a dawah and knowledge project. Okay, I need to raise money for this learning center, these halaqat, or so I can afford to bring in guest speakers from time to my community. And some people will shame them and say, what's wrong with you? Don't you see people dying? Like basically, and I get it. In Ramadan, more than ever, we want to prioritize the poor, the needy, the hungry. All that I get. My only thing is when people want to give their zakat, their sadaqah, out of their love, different things speak to different people. And some people are going to say, you know what? I was waiting in Ramadan to give money to this Muslim woman's halfway home because I wanted the deed of donating. Or someone's going to say, hey, I wanted to start the soup kitchen, or I wanted to start this halakha fund or whatever. I don't think we should downplay or be rude to people or almost shame them. Oh my God, how can you not send to Sudan or Gaza or to the Rohingya? Because I feel that it's not productive. And again, people's donation is something private or personal. Definitely invite them to give first to Gaza, to Sudan, to all these other causes, no doubt. But the element of donation for shame or that sort of fatigue, that kind of bothers me. I don't know if you get what I'm saying or if you've seen this as well, but I have seen this come up a few times.
Yeah, definitely. There's both a combination of fundraising shame and of a fundraising fatigue, right? Because everybody's trying to fundraise in Ramadan and everybody wants to donate to everything in Ramadan. But obviously, there's always going to be considerations, right? Like you still have to pay your rent. And I was actually just thinking about how you and your family sit down ahead of time and plan out your Ramadan plans. I think that's something that people should do, even considering who they're going to fundraise for or who they're going to donate to, right? In Ramadan. A lot of organizations will say, "Oh, automate your donations," right? Even if it's $1 a day or $2 a day or $5 a day, whatever it might be, just automate it daily so that you don't have to think about it. Personally, I'm not a fan of the automating thing because I think it should be intentional. The ways that you give in your sadaqah, it shouldn't be something that's just blindly taken out of your bank account by the app. I think you should make an effort in some way, shape, or form, whether it is but you're still directly sending it online or you're dropping cash into a donation box, but there should be an awareness, there should be a presence of mind in what you're donating to and how you're donating each and every single day. And so just thinking ahead of time in Ramadan or before Ramadan, I should say, is it going to be maybe 1 week you're going to donate locally, right? And you scout out your local organizations or projects that you care about. And you say, I'm going to commit this much to these things. Or I'm going to choose one country and I'm going to donate for them every single day of Ramadan. Or a combination, you can mix and match as well. And it is really important to be able to balance between your local and global priorities. I think that's really important because sadaqah should first be given in your own neighborhood, right? We should think about the fact that in our own neighborhoods, there are Muslims who are starving. There are people who are starving and going and experiencing poverty and food insecurity and so much more. So, are we making sure that we're contributing to our communities? For those of us who may live in more affluent areas, are you thinking about like in your city? How about a Muslim community in a less affluent neighborhood? What support do they need in Ramadan? Is there a Muslim food bank that you can contribute to? So again, yes, absolutely, the global ummah has an obligation on us, and a dollar goes a long way. If we are living in the West and we are living in decent economies compared to other places in the world, $1, one Canadian dollar, one American dollar can go a long way elsewhere. So factor that into your donation, your Ramadan donation rotation as well. I think that would be a helpful way to look at it. And there are other things as well. Locally, in my community at our Islamic Center, we decided to do things a little differently. Community iftars are always a valuable part of any community Ramadan experience. Um, but for us, ourselves, we decided we are no longer going to have community iftars on weekends simply because, unfortunately, there was so much wastage of food that it really felt like it defeated the purpose. Instead of feeding hungry people from Ramadan who are going to be mindful and we're considering the fact that this is all an amana, people are giving money and sadaqah to purchase this food, we would find so much food thrown away. And that just didn't sit right with us, especially right now, especially with Gaza being as it is, especially as Sudan being as it is, especially with the Uyghurs being put in concentration camps as they are, especially the Rohingyans suffering in refugee camps everywhere, especially with Muslims in Syria still recovering from the horrors of Bashar al-Assad's era, right? There's still so much hunger and starvation. It didn't feel right for us in our privileged neighborhood into food that is unfortunately going to be wasted. So what we decided instead was we're still doing an iftar fundraising campaign, but we're saying the amount that would go to feeding people locally, we're sending that overseas and feeding twice the amount of people. And alhamdulillah, so far it's been quite successful that way.
No, I agree. You know what? On this topic, I actually wanted to ask you, and I think that what you say is it's spot on. I can't disagree with anything you said. Ramadan, again, as we said before, different things to different people. Even I give the only example with my wife with the planning meeting. I do think for some folks, the waste is never an excuse. That's not an excuse in Ramadan or outside of Ramadan, certainly not in Ramadan. But I think for some people, they benefit from those social touches. They look at Ramadan as, even if they go for Tarawih, even if they go for the masjid, the part of it is also them being around their brothers, being around their sisters. And I was going to ask you, what do you think? How do you operate on that? Or how do you feel like Ramadan to Ramadan, or maybe from even when you were maybe back in your college days to today? How do you balance that? Where, you know what, I really got to give some of this time to just ibadah, and maybe some of the socializing is going to be a distraction versus, you know what? Yeah, you know what? I do need to, I do want to connect a couple times in Ramadan with either these friends or these relatives or this. How do you balance that?
Honestly, for the past many years, again, my community center has community flowers every Saturday, Sunday, so we would just be totally swamped with that. That would be my family's commitment, and we did not have invitations for other people. We wouldn't go to people's places. We wouldn't have people over ourselves. We'd just be like, "Here's the community of flower. This is where we're gonna be at." So that's what we used to do. There were a couple of years when I would say, "Okay, at least once in Ramadan, I'm gonna go to a friend's house for a flower," and that's it. It would literally just be once in the entire Ramadan. This year, we're not doing the community iflars, but just because of the timings for iftar and work and things like that, my family has switched my entire family gathering from Friday nights to Saturday evening. So we're doing our extended family iftar that way. And then a couple days a week, just myself and my siblings, we have iftar at my parents' place. The rest of the week, just at home with our spouses. So keeping it that way, I'm probably also gonna do just one dawat this year as well, just for a couple of friends, and that's it. I prefer keeping it low key. That's just how I am. But I do know lots of other people really enjoy having the bigger iftar parties and things like that. And you know what? I'll give props, like you said, there is more of consciousness around not doing that the last couple of years because of the heightened awareness around Gaza and the appropriate community not shame, but awareness, the self-awareness and tact, which I think is really important because we should be balancing between the community connections, but never going into that realm of lavish iftar parties and having all these people come over and turning it into a whole production. And then people inevitably miss Arsha at the masjid or they miss worship that they would be doing otherwise. So for myself, I like to keep it pretty scheduled. If it means missing out on worship, then that's a no-go. But there's always readjusting your schedule for that one day or those couple of days. And I think that would be a good way for people to think about how can I have that community social connection while maintaining my worship. So if your habit is, for example, you read half a juz after Isha or after Taraweeh, and you're not going to be able to do that because you're going to have this invitation, you're going to be busy with cooking and cleaning and taking care of people and talking with them and packing up afterwards, then how can you redistribute those pages of your khatam earlier in the day or even the previous day and then the next day, something like that?
Yeah, no, totally agree with that. In fact, I find myself sometimes in a year when I'm walking or like doing a walk in the evening or something, I'll listen to an ebook or some audio YouTube lecture that I have a bunch that I've saved, and I'm like, I got to catch up on this one. But then in Ramadan, pretty much everything else takes a back seat to the Quran. Because the other day I was looking at something, I was like, man, I didn't. And you know him, he's I think a friend of the shows. But I was like, I really want to go back and listen to something by Dr. Hatem Al Hajj, and then I was like, no, man, this can wait. Ramadan belongs really to the Quran as much as possible. So no, I think a great discussion. Zainab, I want to ask you one thing. Moving on with all these Ramadan dynamics, us talking, obviously, we're inshallah, all accounts as people who love the Deen and try to do what we can in serving it. But at the same time, we're from the non-scholarly community. We're people who, inshallah, we're people who are Muslim and we strive to do what we can. So when it comes to us as followers who we try to support our community, support our scholars, what would you do about some of these topics that we have in our tradition? They're important topics. There's no aspect of the Deen, I believe, that's not important. But sometimes in Ramadan, they can become a little bit combative. They can become a little bit negative. They can suck the air out of the room and they can cause argumentation. We'll start Ramadan. Typically, you'll see the year after year will be the same moon sighting step. Do you follow international? Do you follow local? Do you follow calculations? And then once we finally agree on that, then the topics will come up. Okay, are people doing the 8 rakat tarawih? Are they doing 20? Are they doing 36? What are they doing? And then other topics will even come up about breaking the time of breaking the fast or certain or etikaf. I'll always see an old article come out about that there's so and so madhab says women can do etikaf in their home or something like that. So my issue again, I totally respect and love that our ulama work so hard to document and have these spirited debates and have these positions. But for the lay people who are approaching Ramadan and trying to experience Ramadan, what context, how would you navigate these? And again, I'm specifically talking to those of us, our listeners who are We're just Muslims trying to get that sweetness of Ramadan. And I'm not discounting the positions, but how would you navigate some of this stuff?
I think we overcomplicate it, honestly. For those of us who have been Muslim most of our lives or for many years, I think we should be able to come to a point where we're like, okay, I know where I stand on XYZ point, and that's just what I'm consistently going to go with. Whether that's local sighting versus global, or 8 versus 20, or i'tikaf versus no i'tikaf for women. Just for many people, they already are following a certain set of scholars, or your local imam, for example, if he is truly a qualified scholar, not just some well-meaning brother who is leading the prayer but is not well-versed in fiqh. Turn to those who you trust, those who you've already been following for a lot of knowledge, and just go with that. And for those who are still learning, always, again, like the standard advice, I think, is pick your teacher and stick to them. And if you're a lay person who doesn't have that much depth of knowledge and you can't figure out what's more authentic or what's not, just go with, for example, if you come from a Hanafi family and you don't necessarily identify as Hanafi, but that is your default that you're falling back on, just fall back on. That's fine. Nothing wrong with that until you are more religiously literate yourself and educated in a sense that you can make those discerning decisions, right? At the end of the day, your intention is to worship Allah. Your intention is to focus on your ibadah and to have it accepted. Just go with that. Really, really not that hard, I think. And I think we need to, again, just reshift our focus from the details to just get her done. And make sure that you have a clear vision before Ramadan even starts. Are you going to go local versus global? Are you just going to go with what your local masjid says or not? Things like that. Just plan it out ahead of time so you're not taken aback within that first week of Ramadan, suddenly trying to decide, oh no, am I doing this or am I doing that? At least
Yeah,
that's my take. I don't know about you.
I agree. And I really love you throwing in "get her done," a very proper Southern expression. So that was great.
So with all that said and done, I want to wish you and your family Ramadan Mubarak from me and mine and from the entire Muslim Matters team, and of course to our listeners as well. Whatever you choose to do, whether you decided to go local or global, whether you're praying 8 rakats or 20 rakats, you're still our brothers and sisters in Islam. Make sure that you are making dua for us and for the rest of the ummah, for the people of Palestine, for the people of Sudan, for the people of the Rohingya Muslims, the Uyghur Muslims, and every other oppressed Muslim truly in the world, because there's so many of us. May Allah grant us victory, grant us strength. Let this Ramadan really be a turning point in all of our lives. The good stuff. So stay tuned. Make dua for us. Don't forget to donate to Muslim Matters as part of your Ramadan donation rotation. Jazakumullah khair. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Hey everyone, don't forget to subscribe to our podcast and follow us online on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram on our handle Muslim Matters. And check out our site daily at MuslimMatters.org. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you in the next one, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.